I am a believer, or I guess I'm thinking I'm inventing really, sort of the unified field theory of a person, because I look at my work and I say, okay, well this kind of hangs together, and then I realize I'm this collector sort of person, and I say, what is that, does that have anything to do with it? Because it all comes out of one person, and is there something that kind of ties it all together? And I think a photographer is in some sense a collector, at least. He has his predilections, he's drawn to this, he's drawn to that, and you're drawn to the things you collect, and for me the issue was to try to make something out of them that could amount to something more than an accumulation of stuff. In fact, even parenthetically, I must say, I met a guy once who was a collector, and it changed my life. He was a stamp collector, and to be in the competitions he was in, you had to be the best in your nation. And then he competed on a world level with the best of people in other countries. And he showed me his South Pole stamp collection, which was like this on a shelf. Everything about the ecology of the penguin, and a signed letter flying over the South Pole with Admiral Byrd. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I said, everything I've done has been just an accumulation of penny ante stuff. I should try to make a collection that amounts to something. And so I'm also thinking, when I'm doing photography, I'd like to do something that amounts to something. And so I've really tried to do that here. One doesn't want to claim too much for oneself or anything, but in doing this, what I really discovered, because I went through, I don't know, 8,000 or 10,000 proof prints. I couldn't even begin to look at negatives. And it soon became a little daunting, because I started out thinking, well, I'll just get the best ones and I'll have a little show, And then it became clear that there were plenty of best ones to do. I could have done a number of shows like this. So then what does one do then? What are the criteria? And so I conceive of this show, one, as a body of separate works, separate series, but I also conceive of it as something akin to an installation. I tried to find work, and sometimes work really presented itself to me, that spoke to other work and other series. So for me, the thrill and the success of it is, again, like an example of kind of a unified field theory of one's art. I mean, this is what, 40, 50 years of work. And the fact that something in one series can relate to something in another series, and the whole of all of it, I just offer that to you as, if you see something happening, it may be intended. I'm really grateful that photography became the thing that I finally attached myself to, or attached itself to me, because of the way it allows me, encourages, demands of me a certain kind of attention to the world. There's a painting that I cite to my students by Bruce Nauman. And I remember when I first saw it, I think it was in the Whitney, and I walked up. It was a long, skinny painting, and it was all words. And I looked up, and it said, "Pay attention, motherfucker." and I just thought, oh, is that about this painting, or about the world, or about my relationships, or about, what is this supposed to? And I just loved it. And I think photographers should have that as a T-shirt, and probably everybody else as well. But I'm thinking of how, one, I see the world, and how I hope the viewer can see the work. I hesitate to offer instruction to people who are perfectly intelligent, But I remember driving to school yesterday and thinking about how one sees the world as a photographer. I'm just driving, and I glance over, and there's some sort of a power station thing with green chain link fence around it, and four or five yellow, protective posts. And I'm just kind of glancing at it, sizing it up a little bit, and then there's a road sign that's one of these curvy things, and does it really make me sick to say that I actually laughed out loud when I saw that thing against this sort of rigorous? I mean, it is a way of seeing. But another way of seeing, which I think has a lot to do with maybe more often with the photographs. I mean, frankly, some of that stuff gets in to the work, and for me, it's an avenue of entry and an amusement, and that's great. It's a habit of seeing, for which I'm grateful to the, I guess, discipline of photography, to see more. For instance, if I may draw attention to a couple of things. There's in the gas station series, there's a little girl going into a gas station, and there's a sign that says Minnows, and there's Jiminy Cricket painted on the wall. And in a way, it's surface, delightful. I enjoyed it. She's just coming in the door. She's got this little pose. She's not posing, but it's just that moment, and I loved it. And at the same time, what I really valued, to me, was unpacking that, if I may say, that the shape of her body sort of echoed the shape of the hand-painted letters, and the fact that here's this little girl in the middle of nowhere, and to the right in the distance is a little clothesline, and to the left, of course, Jiminy Cricket, the wisecracking male, emblematic perhaps of guys she's going to meet in the near future, and so on. Yeah, I mean, it describes a kind of a life situation, and yet at the same time it's extremely mundane, extremely everyday. And for me, that's just a lot of I don't know, intellectual fun and fun. And one other picture I'll mention too, just as an example, is there's a seesaw in the middle of sort of nowhere. And in the background, just about as small as you could see, is an oil pump, the kind that does this, you know? And I saw that and I said, oh God, can I make a picture here? This is too great. The seesaw and the oil pump, the different lives, the child's life, the adult's life, and then a beautiful, just a delicate little tree with held in place to prevent it from doing any movement at all, with two little wires. It's sort of in the middle of nowhere. And then at the bottom of the seesaw were tires that some adults had taken the kindness to bury in the dirt, so that when the kids hit the ground, they would have a little cushioning. And I'm thinking of the tires, and I'm thinking of the cars, and I'm thinking of the oil, and I'm thinking of the children, and I'm thinking of the space, and I'm thinking of the light. And to me, it comes together in a way that's pretty overwhelming. And to me, the great thing about photography is you can do stuff like that. You know, I remember a good friend of mine, Jack Vernon, who's a novelist and a poet, and I were walking down the mountain in Colorado once, and we were talking, okay, what is it we do? He was a poet mostly then, and what do you do? And we were chatting about that, because you always say, well, what am I doing here? And just something came up, and I took 2 steps off the trail and took a picture and walked back with him, and he said, okay, what did you just do? And I thought for a second, and then I realized I could talk for 2 or 3 minutes about what I just did, because what happens is you see in anticipation of what you're going to see, and then when you see it, you've already kind of put it together. I kind of think of the work, and I think of photography in a way as improvisational theater, in a way. I mean, you're given a line, and then you have to make a coherent drama out of it. And so I'm given something that catches my eye, simple as that. And then I want to make a coherent image out of it. Is there a picture here? I remember Gary Winogrand said of a photograph of Robert Franks once, of the gas pumps in the Americans. He said, how could Robert know that there was a picture there? And I had no idea what he was talking about at the time. You know, and subsequently in thinking about it, I realized that that's a lot of what it is. You've got your improv, you've got your line, and then can you make something out of it? Nobody thinks of photography as a time-based art, you know, as a pictorial, flat plane kind of time-based art, but for me it absolutely is, certainly in the sense that I'm talking about, that one sees something, and then if you look around, you realize that everything's there for a reason. What might that reason be? And they're big, and contrasty, or they're small and subtle. And over time, those things emerge into kind of an understanding, I think. So, you know, I kind of think of photography in that way as kind of a time-based art. I would say one of the bottom lines in any photograph, well, I don't want to make too huge generalization here, but in a lot of photographs, most photographs that I find interesting, there's some characteristic that I would call establish attention. The attention may be inclined more toward the form, it may incline more toward the narrative or some interplay of both, hopefully, but the tension is usually there. And I find nature and culture elements absolutely fecund, you know, something that really drives a lot of it. I'm interested more in people recognizing interesting things in the world than having them think about me and my life. Maybe that would be a way to put it. I have a feeling I said pretty much what I wanted to say, and I appreciate that people are kind of here, you know, so thank you very much.